think we should be live now. So now we can just ping everything out and we should be ready.
All right, I've already pinged. I'm gonna do one more set for live. All right, live tweet is up. Oh, fancy. Yeah. All right, guys ready?
And it looks like we're live.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Blue Horseshoe Club, episode 5. I'm your host, Rodin, and I'm joined here today by our usual, semi-usual folks. We got Caleb, our owner of the SEC Lounge and all-around super voodoo market guy with some crazy stuff going on the side.
Hope.
Right. And our first-time guest here in the show, Anathema. We've had him before too on my stream, and he is also kind of dabbles in the same realm, you know, as kind of out-of-the-box trader market type.
He's one of our most recent additions to the very active MD markets.
Absolutely. We're really glad to have like minds in the show. We don't have too many homes, you know what I mean, in the media space, but it's nice to be able to be out here. So
we have a new home now because
yes,
everyone has just started porting to the new forums, and I've been waiting for this for a long time because I kind of had the suspicion when they said that they were working on putting it on Discourse, and I noticed that the eValkyrie forums was actually running on Discourse. So it's about time that we got new forums. I don't think we've had that since, was it 2006 or something like that? We got the forums as they are now. Oh, well, a week ago.
So the as far as the platform that they're using to actually launch the forums, Discourse, is that a popular platform to do the kind of work?
It's a very new and growing platform. I don't know how extended and used it is yet, but it's kind of like Discord and similar things. It's been trending and really being picked up by a lot of geeks and communities. There was talks about putting some of the Wikipedia stuff on this platform because it's so open-ended and you can pretty much do what you want.
Nice. Yeah, one of the things too I noticed when they were putting out the word on the new forums is forum amnesty from all the people that got banned before.
I do suspect that it's not so much leniency and CCP being nice. It's more the fact that I don't think they know how to actually port the bans from the old forums and make all the identities and stuff work. It would at least be extra work, right?
Yeah, one would think. Well, that, and I mean, personally, I've never been banned from the forums, but I'm not a big user of it. I am hoping though that because we have this new platform, that folks will actually prefer to use this over Reddit. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
I think
exactly, and I think that's what CCP is hoping as well, right? They did give an announcement that they are no longer going to put official news directly on Reddit at all. Anything that's directly related to CCP and patches and stuff like that always goes on the official forums first, and only comments and relinking will be on Reddit. There will be nothing new coming out on Reddit anymore.
All right. Let's see if we can increase your volume, though. Caleb, I think you're coming out really light.
I'm low?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can fix that.
Yeah, it's we're looking forward to it. And then I didn't realize it, but you definitely caught on to it. They didn't have MD. They first launched.
They didn't, but I think I was screaming like 10 minutes after they actually opened everything up, and Norn and Reaver was pointing out that the MD had actually not been created yet. So I was on Twitter poking Falcon going, what the fuck is actually happening? And he was pretty much in progress of actually opening up all the ones that were missing. So I think about 2 minutes or something like that after I was yelling, he had actually made it.
Oh wow, it's crazy. Yeah, well, here's to hopefully better use of the forums. I mean, I really wish they've done this sooner. You know, I think we are at the point though where Reddit is just so normal at this point.
Yeah. To anyone listening, did that help? I think it should have helped, because now it's the right mic, not the wrong mic. I'm sorry.
It's all right. And we'll see. And Athema, are you a big user of the forums, even if it's like, you know, MD side or particular sub forums there? Pause.
Anathema, are you coming through? Did you not get, hang on, wait a minute, maybe you didn't get voice on Discord.
Hey, it's muted. Unhit that.
Okay, that was my bad again. You should have voice now, Anathema.
You should be fine now. Alright, perfect.
Yay, perfect, thanks.
I can come through. So I'm not that big of a user of the forums, but I do keep an eye on it. I mean, I'm glad for changes. I guess that's going to be some new blog. I'm not completely used to the interface yet, but I'm not unhappy about it. And there's been already nice threads and nice stones. There's the 1 trillion we found anyway, so I'm excited for that too.
Yeah, so, we'll see. Is it true that I think it was mentioned? I think last night in Open Comms. I think when they were talking about it. But I guess we're not going to have the ability to keep our Corp forums as hosted in the EVE Online forums, kind of like the way we had it now, or we had it before.
I do think that they are planning on rolling out more and more features and tweaking all this. As mentioned, Discourse is very open-ended. It's very much something that you can grow and tweak exactly the way you want it. And I'm pretty sure that it's also hosted outside of CCP. I don't know if people are actually aware of this, but it's hosted outside, so they don't have to worry anymore about technical issues on their personal on CCP's server side. So now everything is outsourced and it runs on the servers for Discourse, and hence they will never be down when everything else just goes apeshit or downtime or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a big thing, right? I mean, because the way the old forums work, so it was linked to Tranquility. So every time it was down, we would lose forum access and the ability for CCP to actually communicate with us. That sounds really silly, but I guess it's the way. It's just the way the back end of it works. You know, the way the way the spaghetti wires are all connected.
Yeah, and that's a shame. It's the case for the API, which you can't really use fully if it's a downtime. It would be nice if they try to do something with the SI. They probably could. We'll see about that.
So what we're supposed to be doing today, or trying to do today, is a little bit techie stuff, because we want to see if we can't catch up on all the things that we had planned before all the nerf bats and the dev hold my beer moments. We had a lot of small things we wanted to talk about, especially regarding market tools and services out there, especially third-party stuff. So I have a few things that I wanted to show people, and among them is a small video that Jintan made, and I would like you guys to comment on, because it's one of those features that are in Eve, but a lot of people actually don't know about. So I'm gonna show it, and we can talk about it afterwards. Hang on.
Hello everyone, it's Ian Tarn here, and today I'm going to be going over how to utilize corporation insurance. In order to do this, you first need to find an assembled ship within your corporation hangars. After this, you simply insure them like you would any other ship, right-clicking them and hitting the Insure drop-down option. From here, you get all the options that you normally would, such as levels of insurance. With the insurance contract set up, this now means that the ship will be insured for anyone in the corporation who is able to take it from the hangar. As you can see, my alt is able to take it from the corp hangar and put it in his personal ship hangar and board it, all without voiding the original insurance contract, as you can see. This means that were I to lose this ship in anything other than suicide ganking in HiSec, I would still be able to get the payout. However, unlike with regular insurance, this payout does not go directly to the owner of the ship, it goes to the corporation wallet, which is also where the original insurance ISK is taken from. In fact, a corp-wide notification is sent out upon the loss of a corporation-insured ship as well, which makes it an amazing thing to annoy your corp mates with. And in case you don't believe me, here is the insurance payout in the master wallet of the corporation. As with all insurance contracts, however, note that trading or contracting this ship will void the insurance. The only way to trade this ship to another member of your corporation is through the corporation hangar structure. But beyond that, how you use this is up to you. Personally, I'd suggest using it on ships that are already handed out by corps, such as T1E War or even Dreadnoughts, if your corp is rich enough. Oh, and it's worth noting that right now this feature is not functional in citadels, only within outposts or NPC stations. Thank you for watching, and fly smart.
And we're back. Did you guys know about this?
Nope.
I think it's kind of interesting that there's so many of these things when, well, I made a little game of it a while back of asking people if they know where specific features in the game is, and it came up because I had actually forgotten where the dividend payout button was actually placed, and I was looking for it, and it took me a while to figure out that they had actually put it on the corporation home front page. And if you do not have a character with director roles, the button doesn't actually show. So it's one of those hidden so well that you have no chance of guessing by intuition where it should be, right? And this is another one of those where unless someone's told you, you have no chance of knowing or guessing that there's an actual corp level based insurance available. And then of course the small detail that it actually becomes void if you contract it. I don't actually know if Gintime tested if it also becomes void if you corp contract it, because that would be kind of stupid. so it's again, it's one of those things I haven't played with at all, but I'm sure that there's someone that could come up with a really seriously good business plan on how to use this on a corporate level to support SRP or similar things.
I mean, definitely, you know, because you have the ability to, if you as the corporation was the one handing out the ships, it only makes sense that if you have the ability to actually to ensure that the money goes back to you, right? I mean, so right now when individual players receive, as I didn't know this, you know, so I guess the way it would normally happen would be the corporation itself would never ever receive the insurance payout from destroyed ships, even though it was coming out of SRP. or coming out of?
It would have to be planned, right? It would have to be something that that was utilized in a way that where all the numbers were crunched and stuff like that. And then of course it would have to be so people that get insured ships from that's been Corp insured don't actually put their own insurance on top of that and then void the Corp insurance, because then it kind of breaks the whole intention, right? But I just think it's one of those interesting things, especially when you start talking about the things that Quant has kind of promised that we're going to start seeing new contract forms, like, well, basically hailing back to the old free-form contracts where you could actually do things like create a loan contract, but the problem was that it didn't have collateral and stuff like that. So it was kind of used only for scamming. But now eventually they're looking at creating things like collateralized loan contracts. It's a little bit of a pointer to all the things that is still possible. We still have to do a lot of workarounds, but there are so many business models out there that have not been tried for ages or at all, and we're really just waiting for people to have the guts and go out and do something with this, especially when it comes to public meta markets, the whole MD stuff. On that note, I think I would like to ask Anathema, how did you start getting into this, and what motivated you to start doing public business like this?
So it was really a coincidence, because I didn't think I would like do much with MD because they're a tough crowd. I mean, you two probably know about it, but it is really tough to get a loan without any collateral. But still, that's the kind of loan you need to get trading, because when I came back to it in the beginning of this year, I liquidated my sets, had about 30 billion in liquid, but I knew how to trade because I made all that money before trading when I was playing on and off. So I wanted to do it. I started trading a little bit and I saw it work well. I saw more items, but considering I could pull, I think I pulled something up to 10 to 15% returns per week. At that point, it would be really not optimal to have all the SQ can lose, because you're playing with returns. You can do a lot of money, and borrowing at that point was like the best investment I could make into my own business. So that's what I wanted to do.
Oh, I had double video. Just on that note, you had a rather high payout of dividends, which is usually not what you do when you do collateralized loans. So I was a little bit surprised that you had that higher payout, because if you do collateral, then usually the range is between 2 and 4%, and rarely goes above that. But you paid out up to 10 and above, right?
So I made 10 and above, and the deal was that I would pay half of the profits to the investors. So the investors ended up going, I think the average for the first one I got was 5% per week, which is really high. But at first it was just a thought that I would give half my profits back to investors. And even though now it's much lower because I play with much larger amounts, I think it's still the philosophy behind what I do. It's you give me enough money to invest and I'll give you half the profits, and that's a model I want to keep right now. So at the beginning it was a lot because it was small amounts and I did a lot of trading. Now it's going to get into bigger amounts and I'm going to do more passive things with it, so it's going to be lower, but the philosophy is the same basically.
I think the interesting part from my perspective is that, well, first of all, you say that it's a very hostile crowd, the MD, and getting these public loans up and running. One of the things that I wonder is why people are not open to expand the model, because from my perspective, I've only seen like actual collateralized bonds in the MD for the last 5-6 years. Since the big crashes, right? There's not been anything else offered. No one has been doing anything remotely in the realm of using shares. No one has moved very far away from the business plan. I think what's interesting about your offer is that it actually does move away from the classical business plan, in that you put up this half to you and half to the investors, which again brings on what I have already asked you. Have you considered changing again and maybe doing something with less collateral when you've already proven yourself, and considering using something like a share-based system or a variation on the thing with I don't know, a dynamic interest rate, kind of like you're doing now, but where you maybe take less of a share but then less collateral?
I've considered all other things, and I think that I might. There's two things I'm considering doing in the future. Currently, my business runs kind of on a share model right now, so I'm not going to pay any dividends, but the share are going to appreciate every time I change the fund composition, because it's going to be a speculative fund. And the target date is about January. So in January, the shares will be reevaluated to whatever they're worth, and then people will be allowed to trade those shares and stuff like that. So that's what I'm doing right now. In the futures, I'm keeping an eye on some items which might be interesting, like BPOs or other things that, in which case a collateralized or a fixed rate loan would make more sense, because I can predict the return rate very easily. And unless the whole market crashes, then the return rate is going to stay the same. So I can say I can borrow that is for 2%, and I can get above 2%, then I'll be fine. But with speculation, it's a lot different, because you can get really good return, but you can't predict that you will be the 2% average.
Now, did you actually use any of the existing business models when you rolled out your first offer?
I never thought about any other business model. I didn't really check. It was very informal at first, because Rodin told me he had 5 billion to invest, and I said, okay, I'll take 5 billion and I'll give you half the profits back, right? And since then it kind of grew, so I had to set up provisions for people who wanted to withdraw, for people who wanted to join at any time. I did some disclosures about where my APIs are, what I do with risk, and all of that. But I didn't base myself on any other business model. I just went with my own gut, and
you didn't actually use the original MD business model that Hex created way back in the day?
Oh, I'm probably like even too recent to know about it. I haven't heard of it, to be honest.
Well, it's one of those things that came into being a long time ago, and no one's actually moved further from that, and they tend to all use that as the foundation. It's just interesting that you didn't know about it and didn't use it, and that's why you have then come up with a system and a business model that's actually different than the traditional collateralized loan model. And I just think that's kind of a fun fact, because it's been so stale in the MD up until recently, right?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you do trading, you have to make your own calculations. You have to make your own decisions. You can't just set up take what someone else did and use it as everyone else does, because you'll only be a day trader at best. You're just flipping items at that point, right? If you want to get better at trading, the best thing you can do is look at the game on a broader scale and try to try new things and try to make new decisions and try to understand how the market will react to what you do. So that's also a mindset I have. I really want to figure things out and make my own thing, rather than following whatever other people do.
I think a funny fact is that a lot of the things that are being rolled out now and the increased activity in the MD seems to have, well, of course, it's been influenced by some of the things that happened with NETC, and of course with Mogul coming out with all their products and services. That I'm going to show one of them a little bit later, but what really kicked this off, if I'm not mistaken, was actually when Rodin started trying to create a small community of minor investors. And what actually gave you that idea, Rodin?
To be all honest, that was like my last bit of something to do in Eve. and whatever happened from that will decide whether I actually stayed or left the game. that was like, well, if this becomes a positive experience, I'll stick around and we do something with it. And it did. In the end, I actually didn't make that much money. Most of my profits actually went back to my investors. So what I got out of it, not so much was just the ability to keep playing at a higher level in the market. So in a way, I kind of worked. I worked for ammo, basically. That's all I did for those several months. I worked for ammo, man. But it was great because then I forfeited extra profit for the ability to have that connection and shared experience with other market players. So it was worth it.
And I think the interesting thing is that you did it just in the wake of your activity with running for CSM, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh man, that was super awkward. When that whole thing went down, super awkward.
So it was kind of your rope that kept you interested in playing Eve. You were actually seriously considering quitting.
Yeah, that was really because at the time it was like, oh, man, like things just felt stale, It was the same people fighting over really meaningless stuff. There's no great conflict. There was no, it was what conflicts and what wars we were engaging in. It was completely artificial. It wasn't based on scarcity. It wasn't based on in-game animosity. It was arranged fights. It was arranged conflicts, right? I mean, there's
mock warfare.
There's no passion or value in that.
No, and of course now we've had about 2 weeks of talking about these things, and I know that you've been part of the discussion even before that, the weeks coming up to the big nerf stuff. And we've been talking about depletion, we've been talking about scarcity, about bottlenecks, about competition, and the availability of any type of market share access and barrier of entry. And it's a thing that's not been a problem for the game up until like recently, where the alphas came in, and it's funny to see that everything is just almost coming to a halt and becoming extremely stale. So it's only for the lulls and good fights. No one really cares because no one is really strained that much, and until someone in organizational manner actually feels a massive number of supers or titans, it doesn't really hurt, right? So all these ISK wars, they don't really matter when the ISK faucets are so massive. And it's the same with raw materials. When people have been stockpiling them without any loss for years now, there is really no incentive to fight other than for the fun of it.
Yeah, I mean, like these drop rate changes to things like small ancillary armor uppers, to the faction battleship EPCs that's coming up. It's cute at best. Cute at best. These things have been stockpiled for years. It's not gonna like it will literally take like several months at least of being exposed in that kind of altered drop rate environment for things to hit the market.
Yeah, and
it would literally take that long.
This shows that there's a huge problem with just building on old code, right? Because many of these things come from the fact that the CCP tends to use static loot tables, and they can only really change them when they're doing a patch. There's no dynamic responsiveness of any of these tables, which means that if there is a surplus compared to destruction, that's just going to compound month over month over month over month. And I'm sitting here looking at my 100,000, 200,000 units of meta items, and it will never ever be used, right? Because there is not that much depletion in the game in any way, and I'm still buying them, right? This is a problem that CCP are still spawning things that are so everywhere in the game and in such huge numbers. They need to start considering how to maybe use something like the AI to have a responsive type of loot tables, so we start getting these diminishing returns. it makes no sense if the rarity just goes to nothing on things like drops.
I mean, there's two things that can happen. The first one is that faction BPT is already available for LP, so you could do all together with the drops, and the market would take care of it. You would have mission runners, you would have people selling LP, and you would have people getting BPCs for LP. That would be pretty good.
Well, ideally you would have the ability to do something like reverse engineering with some of these things, or like in the past when you could actually use some of the meta items and the tiered things to increase the invention chances, or maybe it should actually be a modifier to building speed or things like that, and then they should nerf build speeds on every blueprint out there to extremely slow levels, because right now we have these infinite service slots for building, which means that you could just parallel add more and more characters, and you can just skill point inject them to the level that you need as an extra industrialist. So there is infinite scalability on industry, but there is nothing to limit it. There's no proper bottlenecks. Everything is just flat. And I mean, on that note, I would actually like to ask if Marcia would drop in comms.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, do you think, I've kind of thought about it before, is there just too much stuff in Eve? Like it seems like there's too much like modules that don't really get used, you know?
Too much
like
stockpile of especially things like modules, right? It's also why you only really have metaphors in any doctrines or any fits, because there's plenty of it. It keeps dropping. There is rarely a need to go for meta 3s when it comes to price, and the benefits from metas 3 and 4 up to Tech 2 are usually not that good. In the past it was really worse, right? Because meta 4s were actually sometimes better than Tech 2, which was horrible. But it's just that CCP have not had a dynamic loot table ever, and they've not actually made them match the consumption of the players.
What kind of game has a dynamic loot table that we could probably work out as a basis of
I don't know. I don't really think there are any, because in most other games you don't really need it, because you don't have this ecosystem creation destruction thing that you do in Eve, right? Most other games don't have something in that realm of ecosystem, so I don't think there's any comparison out there. I did say that now that I know that Quant has gotten hands on the new tools to actually know exactly how many units of every single item type in the game are actually in the game at any time, you could easily create an algorithm that basically looks at what is the delta from day to day on a specific item, and if it's too high and too many things are being stockpiled, you just keep dropping the loot table until you start seeing it either flatline or diminish. In my personal opinion, I think they should always go for a change that diminishes the availability.
Also for meta items, they're gonna do something at least with it. I don't know how far they're gonna go with it, but they said they wanted them to be manufactured, just like T2
that's
items.
One of the big promises, and I do hope that they are serious about that. But I think
and
the
whole
whole
dropping, because then there would be one thing less to make the influx of modules like which is very high right now.
Yep. Please, Norman or Marcia, if you guys want to come in and and join the convo, please do.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
Yep.
Hello. Sorry, I didn't look at the show notes for today. What's the topics that you're looking at?
Features, especially market-related features, MD culture, but we've kind of skipped past that, and we're now in a segue on the whole rarity, depletion, and the lack of, because yeah, we got a little bit sidetracked, but we were supposed to talk about MD culture and investment and business plans.
Right, well I do have something on this, because it's a topic that came up in response to the complaint about SP alts farming unassailable wealth, which I saw. I can argue both sides of this, but I was talking to Noni in the background about it, and it seemed like there was a bit of lack of understanding of how industry works in the first place. Like industrialists that have got a lot of alts, it's very passive. So your argument about the fact that there's no depletion on slots is quite true, actually. And it's always been logical for industrialists to run multiple accounts with lots of slots, and 10 is not really a hard cap if you're good at it. So there's a question there about, have industrialists always been bypassing some of the risk sort of gameplay?
Well, it's just the fact that the loot tables have not been balanced to the player base and the player's activity since I think I have to go back before 2008, before it was even remotely balanced, and even then that was mostly because there was still what is usually referred to as gun mining, because you could actually recycle the meta items and get pretty much the same mineral value back that the Tech 1 variant had. So, or even more. But
well, I'm not really talking about industrialists in the sense of people who go out and mine. I'm talking about people who harvest materials, whether they've mined it themselves or they've bought it and then start building. And it's the building side that I'm aware of, where yeah, you can scale it pretty high, and if you're good at it and you're making enough money, obviously you can sub those accounts. And also, like with MCT, you can train alts in the background so that a 3-slot account, you don't even really need to be training the main. Like, you can train the alts up to about 2 million SP, and they can build 10 slots T1, or they could be building capital mods or T2 components, and you can just keep scaling it until you've got. And as I say, a lot of the industrialists that I've spoken to over the years have got 10 to 20 accounts with 3 slots each, and they've been doing it for a long time. And I don't think that the only sort of tweak that I saw to industrial level gameplay in sense of builders was team, and that was removed.
Did you think teams was good, Marcia?
Yeah, I think a lot of industrialists looked at it and were like, this is interesting. It could be really inconvenient having to move all the time, but it gives us more opportunity to compete with each other. And I think it was a shame that it failed.
It failed because it wasn't being used, right? Or that was the reasoning, like, at least as a response, official response from TCP.
Yeah, it was completely broken. Like,
yeah, that's a shame.
Well, that was because of the bidding thing, right? It could be cornered and abused. The idea about behind teams as a modifier and potentially being linked into some sort of proper sync, whether it's a time sync or a sync to something like planetary interaction or anything like that. It was a really good concept, but it was implemented in the most horrible way I could imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I was out of India at the point that it launched, and I kind of looked through the notes with great interest, and then kind of thought, this is really complicated out of the door. I have no idea how this will work. I will wait for people to design third-party apps to bid on teams. And as it happened, the abuse was so quick and so massive that it got pulled before anything really developed in the background.
I think what bothers me is that sometimes it seems as if the coders and the developers from CCP tend to only know like 2 types of functions: linear functions and exponential functions. And if it's not that, they don't know how to code it. And that's exactly the type of functions we do not need any more of, because that is so easy to game and to just suck on forever. It scales infinitely.
Well, do you think it's kind of a bit of a problem too from trying to get the new players into that kind of scene where they constantly have to drop the barrier, but there isn't a counter? They keep on giving stuff to us, right, but not really taking anything away, so it ends up being very imbalanced.
Yeah, it's the Monty Hall problem, right? A game master that just keeps giving money, magical items, assets of any kind, and never ever takes it away. In the end, he breaks the game because it's not playable anymore. There is no challenges. It's not fun. There's a limit to how high-end and end-level powered things can be. As I keep saying, when you've given out your dragon mount, how are you going to top that, right? What's the next thing you're going to give out as a mount? I can't think of anything. Well, a gold-colored one.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to make a comparison to other games, as far as stuff like that, you have to add some level of complexity, right? Or not necessarily just complexity, but the next, extra steps. But to do that in Eve feels really, really awkward because Eve is already incredibly cumbersome, depending on the activity that you're trying to do. Being an open sandbox game by its very nature, right? So it's almost as if you have to, in order to have better control for systems like Industry, you kind of have to take away its ability to be affected by the sandbox. Like, I don't know if that's a good solution or even
the other way around,
a reasonable one.
It's the other way around. If you want Industry to work in Eve, you need to make sure that there is scalable bottlenecks, but bottlenecks that scales by adding more risk and assailable wealth into the system. I kept trying to explain to Dirk that the problem is that all the things in space are infinite and scales easily, and all the limitations are on the character sheets. The only thing that benefits is multi-boxers and people that can juggle more than 100 accounts.
Right, well, this point that Okko's making in chat, I mean, we've talked about Mal'Ganis' law before. Like, if you bring in a change that's supposedly to benefit new players, it'll end up disproportionately benefiting vets. But I think this is also true of, if you bring in a change that is supposed to benefit an individual player with just one account, anybody with 100 accounts is going to be able to game it better, unless it's not passive. And the thing with Indie is, when you've got a spreadsheet set up and you've got all your builds set up, you know your calculations, you whittle it down so that you're only doing 10 minutes a day, putting jobs in, and then you outsource everything. So you don't really have to haul. You don't even need to set up market orders. You can set up bulk trades with other people.
Well, it's not really just okay. Let me see if I can explain this in a way that I'm sure that everyone will be able to follow. Right now, right, you have infinite factory slots on stations and in structures. If these were taken back and made into a limited amount, like in the past, not a queue system, don't add a queue at all. Make it totally limited and make it based on things like rigs. And then make the NPC stations a very fixed amount, if any at all. Ideally, I would like to remove all research and all industry from NPC stations entirely. The point is that then you would have the situation where players would start competing on price. That price factor would not be something that you can game by just adding more characters. You still have to pay, you still have to add those slots to the structure and move to a structure where you can pay the price and use your 50 or 100 characters. That's a matter of player build services. This would create a proper price war. This would create proper PvP, and eventually this would be a reason to start fighting over the structures that are available.
Having to move over structures to do several different jobs would be a good idea indeed, because right now, I mean, if you need to double your production, all you're going to do is double the amount of minerals you're going to buy.
Yeah,
and you're going to click like 10 more jobs every month, and it's it. That's it.
And that brings on the whole idea of the destruction of structures, of what they drop, right? I think they drop all things in production, if I'm not mistaken, even in high sec.
Say that again?
Materials that are in production are actually dropped as loot, right?
Yes.
And the blueprints are not, because people were whining like little babies.
It's the BPCs that can be destroyed.
BPCs just get destroyed, right? So they're lost, and this brings on the whole thing of making blueprint copies perishables. CCP needs to start thinking about these things, because without it we have this infinite stockpiling, infinite scalability, extremely easy to just scale up, and especially when people have infinite resources stockpiled, a lot of that is written off, so they really don't care what the margins are when it comes to competing. That's why you have so much junk that's just on the market and never ever gets depleted.
To go back to chat, Oku's saying, would that create structure mania? And I think he's been persuaded by your remarks that sort of unlimited slots probably are causing a problem. It's just how to resolve it. There's already structure mania. I mean, realistically, that's one side of the problem. The other side is that they're really hard to remove and destroy, which is part of the Citadel mechanic complaint, which I think will be addressed. So long term, once POS are removed, if we fully switch over to the new structures, and then they are nerfed quite badly so that they can be attacked in a shorter time frame, and you have to perhaps pay fuel to keep them up, that's viable.
Well,
yeah,
I'd even go so.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Actually, industrialists who set up their own sort of like 20 structure chain to build.
I think I'd go so far and say initially I wouldn't even touch the infinite slots on structures. I think it could actually work. What I think is important then is to make sure that the owners of the structures can see the exact activity levels and price accordingly, because then you would actually have this supply and demand feature added, right? I'm pretty sure that people that have all the builders would then start doing price competition wars, and you would see a lot of things develop from that, but without any limitations at all, or any threat, or any assailability. You have a system that's broken, and I can understand why they try to solve it with adding infinite slots, infinite offices, and all these things. It's just that they totally dropped the ball on the fact that when you bring in all these infinite resources service-wise, there is no need for players to do that. There's no need for scaling. There's no competition arising from that. It's the same you see with the fact that it's so easy to do the zero tax or zero broker fee thing. Most of them is just a race to the bottom because there is no real limitation. The limitation on market orders should never have been on the character sheet. It should be on the structure or the station, and the price should have been moving based on demand. And again, that brings on the fact that it's a one system for player-owned structures. You can't actually set a flat fee and a broker fee, which is what you would need. You would need a percentage and a flat fee, so you can start scaling on those and create the negative feedback, the benefit from dealing in bulk instead of in small stacks.
We see this comment from None, EC Industry Ledger, please, and I totally agree with that. To be honest, if you put a structure up, you should be able to see everything in your structure, whether you're a holder or not. Even if you're in high sec and you're renting your slots out,
yep.
you should be able to see. I mean, perhaps not actually see the item that's being built, but you should be able to see the build time, because it would create a dynamic. Like if you were a structure owner and yours was attacked and you could see that you've got nothing there in build, then you can negotiate differently. If you've got a lot of things in build, then you can contact the people who've put the jobs in build and say, do you want us to defend this structure? We'll hire out mercs. And it creates more content, it's not less.
And it's also because right now we have this industry index thing that's sort of an artificial way of trying to sync stuff out of the system. If we had a proper player versus player market price war, you could just have the price index. You would never ever need this industry index thing. You would just have a price index, and it would just be a flat tax based on sovereignty that would be taken from whichever level of price this has reached, right? That's all you need. So of course it would be a lot more expensive to build in some location like Jita. It would also be more expensive to trade, but that would only be promoting bigger and bigger bulk market stuff. So the more you build, the cheaper the structure owner will make it for you per unit, which means that he takes less of a profit.
Well, you know, the argument has been for a long time against too much granularity because it's giving out too much free intel. But what we're actually seeing is that the free intel's there, but it's only there for very high level players. So this thing that Riva put an article up about a few weeks ago, that was that you can basically work out where people are building supers. that information was there for the people in the know, but for the vast majority it wasn't. Then there was this, at the same time, this proposal for the mining ledger for moon mining, but why only moon mining but not normal mining, and why not industry, why not market? If you own a structure and you want a ledger, then...
And personally, I think that they should actually make it a part
global?
of... I think they should make it a part of an upgrade to scanners and scanner features, scanner modules. So the ledger is basically just a... when it's moon mining, it's basically the structure that has the equivalent of a survey scanner. And it's actually the survey scanner that gives you the ledger of what's going on in the specific system.
You could argue that the ledger, as it stands, should be only for SOV holders, not for people in NPC SOV and not for people in LowSec, because it's a reward for actually owning the space. You could also argue that a similar mechanic could be applied to other structures, that other ledgers could be applied, like a market one or an industry slot ledger, and it should scale depending on what kind of space you're in. So there's more reward if you're in nullsec. I think that's fair.
And then I think Rareness was pointing out one of my favorite ideas ever, to make salvage more like mining. So when a ship is destroyed, the wreck is where you get the loot from, but you have to actually salvage it exactly as you salvage wrecks now. But you would get this field of ships, and you would have to scan them, and when you scan them you can figure out which ones had what modules and potentially salvageable modules, and when you get them out they randomize whether they are actually complete or whether they become destroyed, right? So pretty much what are they called? The scraps, right?
That might work for, you know, the observatory arrays that were proposed, because they were to do with surveillance, and if you had a module that you could say, right, I put this module in and it will scan the whole system for loot, and then you can go scan it down if you're a SOV holder. But I don't know if that would create more loot spew and more sort of drops that would imbalance things, because to be honest, big fights happen and the people in the know will go to the field and they'll loot it, but if you don't know about it, it'll just die in space. Otherwise you would get people picking up every drop in space in nullsec, which could be a bit bad for the loot tables.
I would just like to see that salvaging became more like mining, because it's the alternative, and it needs a, call it a biggest time sink, or a more engaged and gameplay interesting time sink, where you're actually going out there specifically for that purpose and you're specializing in that only.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, one of the things too, so we've been talking about the, you know, the act of production, the act of selling things, the act of creating things. What do you guys think of? Is making changes on those things? Does it become meaningless if you have asset safety in the back end?
Okay, asset safety. I think there is a little bit of a problem, and I agree that they should rethink it, and I think they have actually planned that, but that's of course my tin foil. I personally think that once it's destroyed, right, at that event, it does not actually get asset saved. It actually always drops. That's my personal view. You can extract it from the structure in the invulnerability periods. It would also be something that would be extremely interesting, because if they also change the vulnerability timers, so extra large have 3, large have 2, and mediums only have 1, then all the mediums would become natural loot pinatas. Of course people would not put that much stuff in them, but that would balance out the whole proliferation problem that people are whining a lot about, right? There's a lot of mediums and a lot of larges, and the population of keep stars and Sotios are still fairly low compared to, say, player build stations in the past. I don't think we're on that level yet. When we get there, then of course there's going to be a lot of the of the mediums and the large. But if they are suddenly so much easier to take down, and there's the incentive of getting loot, then suddenly you have a lot more incentive for aggression.
I mean, assets should not be free. I mean, that's like one point I really don't like about SS50 that is free. You don't have to do anything. Your assets are safe regardless. It's not even like in the old Sovnal where you would be locked out of the station with your stuff.
I think they should change it to a flat fee, right? The fee should be based on the sovereignty owner's tax. So in HiSec, even though it's the same system, it should still be in the realm of 4 or 5%. And in Sovnal, I think it should go to the Sov owner, and it should be set by the Sov holder to a maximum of something like 20%. But the downside should be that it would include their own members. They couldn't set them at lower tax levels. It's everyone, hostiles, neutrals, and blues. Everyone gets the same sovereignty tax effect, and that includes asset safety.
Asset safety, though, like the complaints about it are coming from summer children. Sorry, but they are. If you were an old-style industrialist in Sovnal 3 years ago, probably a bit longer, before the IMDA changes, you actually built in station. You kept your assets in station. You put your BPOs in a station and then build in a POS. So the only thing that was at risk was actually the materials, and that's the same in HiSec. It was the dynamic between POS and stations. That was later changed, so you were forced to put the BPO or the BPC into the POS. That's only a relatively new change. And then citadels were implemented and all of the mechanics around those, and asset safety was put in for, and it covers the industrial items that are dropped in space.
It's also why
if they'd not put asset safety in, and people were building in structures in space where everything dropped, they would not have taken it up. So it's fairly obvious that it's been implemented in this way to get take up, and then it will be tweaked later on. It's for us to ask, how can you tweak it to a reasonable level? And it's alright people saying, oh well, if I've spent all this time tearing through a region, taking down structures, things should drop. They never did before. Not being funny, but if you were doing a POS purge for a region, nothing dropped. You'd be lucky if you got stuff from the tower, if there was anything there. People had 24 hours to yank materials, set a timer that was convenient, and then get all the ships out of the POS. It's not like that's been the case ongoing. It's like people are asking for something that never really existed.
I mean, sure, but right now the stuff is kind of still. I mean, there's going to be something to be done about the value of stuff, right? But yeah, what it is, it's just to be determined, because you don't need that many systems to make XCOM. You just need a little bit niche in NOSEC, and then you can have a large corporation make all of their money and just have an EC and just make tons of money.
The people who are complaining the loudest about asset safety are test members on Reddit who've just purged, what is it, Impasse, that they purged, and are pissed off because they have to go through and remove loads of structures. And it's like, well, have you never taken SOV before? Because you've always had to do that purge on towers and replace them. And yeah, it was easier, the timers were easier, but you still had to remove them, and no, you didn't get a drop.
I mean, it's fair to have some choice to do to get SOV, but I guess having loot drop would make it like so there's a lot more incentive to actually like go and blow stuff up, but you could put other things in the game that do that as well.
Well, I mean, Wormholers aren't complaining about the fact that they don't have asset safety. They did in the lead up to it being implemented, but the argument there as well was make Wormhole space different to everywhere else. Keep it the Wild West. Nullsec got a kind of hybridized version. You've got asset safety, but you've got to pay that 15%. It's still a tax, and it's quite a high one. 15% is quite a bit to unlock assets. So the penalties are there, but I think you need to be really careful, because this asset safety argument is coming from a specific group of very young players who are just bitching. They don't really understand older mechanics. A lot of them have probably never even taken a region before. So when they're all screaming on Reddit, is their opinion even relevant?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things too to consider when it came down to those citadels, people just don't care for them. Like, we destroy these things, you know, multiple, you know, the constellation's worth at a time. They never get defended. They're almost always empty, and more often than not, they're not even rigged. You know what I mean? Players put such little value in them, and I almost question why they even put it up in the first place if they wouldn't really put that much investment into having them in the first place.
Do you think they're too cheap at the lowest levels?
They're definitely too cheap.
Right.
I mean, just to give you an idea, so we would have to, you know, show up 3 times to destroy an Astro House, right? We typically bring easily 5 to 7 times the value of what we're killing, because we have to prepare. We have to have that level of preparation in the very, very small chance that these people actually care enough about that structure. So we bring nightmare fleets. You know, nightmares, bazzies, the works. You know, to show up for 15, 17 minutes at a time, and kill it. You know, during those available timers. But yeah, they are too cheap. They're definitely too cheap. And what are they even using it for? They're using it as jet cans. They're really all they are. They're just jet cans, like fancy jet cans. Is all they are.
Yeah, I made that remark when we were in Citadel Slack, Structures Slack, and I was saying, like, if you don't have to put fuel in them, and you can just sort of like troll spam them, somebody with several hundred billion ISK can easily go into any station, system, wormhole, and spam 20 and just leave them offline, just to be annoying.
Yeah, I mean, that may, like, the environment for evicting someone in wormholes these days is so much more cancerous than during the past days.
Be careful what you say, right? Old structure grinding was massively time synced.
Yeah.
It was like bonkers, and it was a lot easier to actually launch things than it is now. So even though you say that the mediums are fairly cheap, compared to smalls, I don't think so.
The rest there was no damage cap. I mean,
yeah.
You could bring the dread and you could pop it. Now you can't because.
Yeah, but then you have auto aggression linked in there as well, right? So you still had to at least feel something. It's not like right now where, is it a phantasm or something like that? You can just use that to take down any mediums. It takes a while, but it's possible.
Like the smallest fleet we would field to kill a medium citadel, 5 BCs, will be done in 22 minutes. For any timer, 22 minutes.
I'm pretty sure that it's a question of fixing the invulnerability timers, but I'm pretty sure that CCP is going to do that. It's just a matter of what level do they want of proliferation of structures before they make them more vulnerable.
Well, you know, I was in Shadow Cartel a few years ago, and they're like kings of Pocos in low-sec, so they had right. So they had all these Pocos, and they had a list of them, and then if any of them were hit, and it was not an automated list, somebody had to go in and code it, but basically, like, they had a timer list of anything that was coming out, and it included towers. Obviously there'd no soft structures, and it's like these Pocos were they were about 600 million at the time. Some of them weren't even bringing in revenue, but we fought them because we'd get a fight. So, like, if we knew somebody was going to show up, we'd go kill them. So they were content generators, and I think when CCP were looking at the smaller structures, they were thinking, well, yeah, make them cheap, make them proliferate because they'll generate content. And now the player base are like, they're not actually generating content because people are just spamming them, leaving them, and then they're a pain in the ass to clear. This is a different problem. So it kind of, whatever their intention was, it hasn't worked because the players haven't behaved the way they did over Pocos.
Well, the interesting thing is, if I'm not mistaken, again, I'm putting on my tinfoil hat for a second, I think that they are eventually going to change the Pocos to a structure-based system as well, so it would become an Upwell like interface. I think they're going to change the composition and the build cost, and there might not be any specific rig stuff at all in there, or any notable weaponry or anything like that, but they're going to be sized as a medium. And I think the whole intention is that then you start getting the proliferation of all these things. You then, and I think this is going to be before we actually get the new refineries, because what should then happen is that the incentive to actually aggress these, if their timer goes down to only 1, then the motivation is to get the now overpriced composites, the building materials, things like salvage. So the expected build cost, or the hit on salvage, and especially on minerals, because I think the refineries are going to be mineral rich, that cost is going to be lower than many of the speculators are expecting. Did that actually make sense?
Well, it did. You know, it's just, I would definitely was not anticipating them to be just an afterthought. You know, and that's probably a problem on my end, underestimating how quickly the material cost would actually get pretty low to accommodate such mass building of these things.
Well, you could even argue that the huge infinite availability of resources might not be such a huge problem if all these things start hitting, because then there is an actual sink, and it should become considerable, and we will suddenly have proper incentives for warfare, for contesting each other, for trolling and disrupting each other's activities. So if this doesn't actually happen in some variant of what we've talked about, I'd be very surprised, because then the game will stay broken.
Now that we've established that we are going to be living in a upwell type of future, should the balancing point then be bound to PI?
I think you're going to see them shift around materials on the new structure, so they might actually not be so PI heavy, because PI is still not something that people really like playing and using. There's a few, again, the very ASPI tolerant types that can really sit there and just nurse these things in this horrible manner. Yeah, they are making money off of it. The rest of the player base shy away from it, and it is because it's really, really badly designed.
I mean, PI is bound to be at the same cost, because I mean, of course it's material, so, but most of the cost is effort. So if it goes up, then some other people are going to probably do it.
Well,
so
it's spreadsheet maintenance, right? And it's initial setup. It's kind of like zombie farming. It's not fun. It's just a hassle. It serves a purpose, but of course it might get some people to log in and sit there and tweak these things and then take the profit. But it doesn't actually incentivize gameplay. I don't see anyone saying, "Ooh, I have to go in and do my PI." Not even the people that do it.
To be fair, I think that was true of people doing reaction farms as well.
Yeah, okay, that's
the reaction farms are not that much effort. I mean, it's kind of boring and all, but at least you don't have to set up 30,000 clicks and have plenty of files to do it.
And it was a fucking mystery. All of those fucking dependencies and how you had to actually sit there and plan setting up reaction files, that was horrible.
I think the complexity was interesting because people who are good at working out statistically the best ISK per hour per tower, they actually enjoyed that, but it was the setup. And I mean, it's going to change, that's fine, but PI needs to be next on the list for looking at sort of indie tweaks, because it is just, it's an abomination to make people play that game. Pretty much.
Would it be better if PI was actually active, like more active, kind of like in the realms of mining now?
Yeah,
well, I mean, there's so many games out there that are semi strategy-based. I mentioned Fallout Shelter, which I personally find extremely entertaining. There's that new one. Hang on, I'm just going to check the name of it. Off-World Trading Company.
Oh yeah, I have played that. Yeah.
There's so many games like this, and then of course you can go all the way back and talk things like SimCity and similar builder games. It's not like this had to be this boring. This could have been extremely fun. And people that say, well, that cost a lot of dev hours. I'm sure that you can go out there and find open source variation games that are based on these mechanics that are easy to tweak and skin to a way that makes it feel like Eve, and then it's actually playable.
I mean, are we? I know we kind of touched on this the last time we kind of talked in this realm, but I think we have a lot of great ideas. I just don't think CCP can execute on them. And I think they understand that the scope of the solutions that we can offer. But again, they can't pull the trigger on it. Like, it's a manpower problem.
Yeah, it is a manpower problem.
Should we pull off the VR kind of forms right now?
The what?
I mean, that's what it's about. The VR kind of forms, like because CCP are investing a lot of their money into VR.
Personally, I'm a little bit opposed because I love the idea of VR, and I like that CCP is again pushing boundaries and putting on the big ambition hat. But I think it's a mistake to focus on that, because I don't think there's the same scale of growth in that area as in spreading out in things like augmented reality, ARGs, long-term entertainment, and esports. I know that you can say that VR is tying into esports, but that's going to be a little bit later than other games, right? So,
well, you support. I mean, I agree with this because I support them doing VR because I think long-term it is the future. But as a player of Eve, I resent the fact that the money we pay for subs is being taken and spun into, like, I think is it 5 different products that they're
yeah,
in
but they're earning back, right? They're earning back their money, and it's been profitable.
No, but that's fine. But they're only earning them back now, and they've taken developmental resources from Eve to pay for those games. Like, they didn't hire loads of new devs and assign them to the projects. They used Eve devs. And that's a complaint that's been leaking through from people who've left, is like they suddenly get yanked from a project in Eve and they're expected to do both. That goes back to the Atlanta office. They had World of Darkness and they were yanked into Incarna unfairly and then pilloried for it. If that's been going on with like all these other projects like Gunjack, Valkyrie, Spark, they've got Gunjack 2 and they've got Project Nova. That's a lot of projects for them to be running at the expense of Eve. And so when we're talking about, well, yeah, we want all these things and we wanted them 5 years ago. That's the thing is, yeah.
And they don't seem to be very good at doing what, wasn't it? What was his name? Landis.
John Landis.
Yeah, because he was very much focused on this whole idea of one big gaming universe, one big complicated New Eden with many different brands and and spin-offs. But this type of brand unification or one world is not really what it feels like. It feels like very disconnected different games, and that's my main issue with all of this.
It's not about EVE Online, which is what they tried to do with Dust. It's about CCP games. That's the difference, is their brand unification is company based, it's nothing to do with the EVE universe. So at that point, like, and I'm not being childishly resentful about them taking our money to develop their company to make sure that it survives, because I think that is fair. But I think when we sit there and say, well, why can't we have this, why can't we have that, and we're hammering developers.
The problem is that they're not upselling, right? That's the main problem. They're not upselling the existing player base to the other brands, which is really stupid. One of the most effective ways to make more money is by upselling an existing sell, right? This is the equivalent to going into a clothes store and you've only planned on buying shorts, and you're going to come out with 3 pairs of shorts and 5 towels and a parasol and sun lotion, and everything has just been piled on by the seller. That's what CCP fails at doing. This is what you could do if, instead of trying to grab a new console market, you focused on saying, well, we're going to take the existing PC Master Race player base that we have in EVE Online, which is in the realm of at least 250,000 people, right? And say, we're going to give these people other games that they already play for other game developers, right? So give them a first-person shooter, give them a good RTS, give them some good ARG, give them some LARP stuff, give them tabletop games, give them all these things. Just expand your product instead of this disconnected one little thing at a time that looks like something that they can reskin and sell off to another developer, which is just stupid, which is what I feel that they did with Spark.
Do you feel like the game is in decline, Eve, right now?
Yeah, and I think that it's mainly because CCP keeps failing on getting new market shares. What I'm seeing the last 5 years is cannibalizing on the existing player base, not really creating a new one, not scaling up the entire CCP consumer base, which is what it should have been doing and focusing on. And the whole joke is, the way to do that is walking in stations. And I know that I keep coming back to that, but without an avatar, it's a very, very strange and different game. Every other game out there has avatars.
Occo's point that he's making in Discord, they can't even, people want to give them money for products, and they can't even successfully run a shop products in.
Exactly, and that's because they prioritize wrong. They make these high-end shiny products where everyone that's been in business knows the profit margin on those are not impressive. It's not like a keychain, it's not like an Eve mug. That's where you put your profit margin. That's your cash cow. Your cash cow is not a levitating Nyx. It's not a Frigates of Eve book that's made extremely high end and nice. That's stuff you make to create branding, to create brand loyalty, to get the geek hard on, right? That's why you make that high end shit. It's not to make money.
And even then, the Nyxes haven't been delivered yet, which is like a huge problem because they outsourced it, but it didn't work out yet. So,
well, at least with the books, you can buy them on Amazon. So even if you don't have to go through the Eve store, whereas the actual Eve products, and I agree with Occo on this, that I think the devs that are involved are probably even more frustrated than us and powerless, because there's just no resources being thrown at this. But people want an Eve mug. They want an Eve t-shirt, they want an Eve keyring, they want an Eve backpack. They want little things that are branded, and they can't get them at an acceptable price. And that's bad. In 2017, that is bad. Rick Stavix has put up a store, and I don't actually like his products. I think his t-shirts are a bit silly. But if he can do it, how can CCP, that's a business, not?
I think my point is that right now I'm cheating on Eve, right? I have been playing the relaunch on the Secret World Legends, and one of the things that really captures me in that game is the clothing, the Barbie stuff, the time that you spend on collecting all these things and sitting there and getting your avatar to look exactly the way you want. This is exactly the market they should have focused on, because skins are nice and it's actually popular in Eve. Well, imagine what level that would be if it was interior design and clothing, right? This would just be explosive, and the amount of plex you could sink out and actually put on your books would be massive.
But the skins that they've put out are upstaged entirely by Tiamba, who's been doing it for years, and Tian City, their skins frankly are better. Like, why can't we buy those? They're really good.
Pretty much. But that's because he takes some of them a little bit into the funny realm, right?
Yeah.
But the point is that if we had even a very primitive walking in stations feature, even if we had what we have now, like a captain's quarters but made on an Unreal Engine, so I could take all the assets that was in Eve, take them out, and do stuff in Unreal myself. That would actually be enough. Even just mod stuff would really benefit Eve, because people would then buy the clothing in the store to then use those assets outside of the game.
Again, a good point being made by Oku in Discord is saying, like, no one is saying, well, they had cheap t-shirts at FanFest, so you could actually buy them on site, and I've heard that that's true. If you're actually there, you can go pick up books, collectibles, you get like little bags of goodies anywhere, depending on who you're associated with. You can get t-shirts, models, cups, key rings, all the stuff that you would expect to be able to get, but only if you physically go, and that's really fucking annoying, because at the end of the day, going to Iceland or Vegas is really expensive. So if you're already shelling out to go all that way, why should that be the only place where you can pick up Eve items at a reasonable price? It's not fair. And it's this thing, like, if somebody like Rick's can set up a store where he's not quite using the IP, but he's using bits of it, and he's making a success of it, and I'm not going to criticise him for that, but he's showing CCP up badly for their failure to do the same, and this has been going on for a long time. It needs addressing, because it's alright them pumping out skins and stuff in game, but people are like, you're milking us, and they resent it, but they also resent the fact that they can't buy physical items at a reasonable price and not have to pay 50 quid delivery. That's just ridiculous.
I think it's just that this resembles the discussions in MD when we start talking about having something like a stock exchange, right? It starts out by a few people saying it's really a disgrace that we don't have this in Eve that is now so old, and then someone explains this is the minimum requirements for a stock exchange to work and be used, and then everyone piles on with complicated things, features that are not necessary, that will only make it almost impossible for the developers to do it. And it's the same when we're talking about these things. We keep talking about big dreams, and Oculus said, well, he claimed that I have 2 big dreams for CCP. No, I actually don't. I just want them to do a minimum deliverable requirements, right? So something extremely simple. Give us the basic tools. Give us a license form that we can use when we want to create things that are using CCP's IP, right? And it's the same when it comes to rolling out things like brand unification. Don't need them to do something extreme like Valkyrie ships that can fly in Eve. All that stuff is pipe dreams. I just want them to implement that Plex is used in all their brands. That's simple, and that my fucking avatar can log into any of the brands and it looks the same and it has the same name. This is not rocket science. This is definitely something CCP can do, and it should not cost that many dev hours.
I mean, to add on to, you know, Marsha's question of, do we think Eve is, you know, proverbially dying? You know,
no, I don't think it's going to, like, I think it's showing signs of
it's aging.
Where no, but I mean, at this point, the signs of sort of serious discontent are coming from older players, not newer players who are just screechers, but they're getting worn out with all the excuses, because they've been making them as well to their own members.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, you know, it's getting tiring. I imagine I don't play high-end gnostic politics or anything like that, but I imagine that these days it only becomes more difficult, you know, as the months and the years go by, to actually gather your troops and encourage them to go fight other people.
Actually, let's talk about esports, because that's something that's, I mean, in the last 5 years, that's the thing that really changed a lot with the arrival of MOBAs and League of Legends. If EVE Online were to make an actual spectator sport, even though it's mostly going to be EVE players watching, if you make a spectator sport that people can play themselves, doesn't that give you like an incentive to play again?
Well, they have 3 brands that
there's no connection though, right?
Listen, they have 3 different brands that are perfectly capable of entering the esport arena. It's just that CCP are not very good at creating the tools and the incentives to take part in this, right? So
and I'm just talking like regular Evil 9 ships, like nothing new. Like just make an arena you can 5v5 with Eve ships. Like just do it.
Well, the AT is actually really popular. So are the spin-off tournaments and similar projects. It from the perspective of esports, and considering that it's basically only Eve players that are interested in seeing this, I think from a percentage participation, it's really, really good. It's just that it's exactly the same argument that made me move to YouTube gaming, because there's no incentive to stay on Twitch, because there's not enough Eve players to warrant this attempt to do any type of monetization. We simply are too niche, not scaled, and we don't have enough market shares of players. So it's the same with the esports. Unless CCP focus on actually getting new players, they will not get the esports success they want.
I think this has been snatched away from them by players, actually. Like, Oku, again, makes a good point. You need to come on comms. Yeah, the AT is largely volunteer, and it attracts a certain group of people, and it's been dominated in-game by Hydra and PL for far too long. It's excluded large groups in the population. It's too much work, it's too expensive, but they've made some very big steps in the last year to be a little bit more inclusive. They support,
which is why they should actually reopen gambling. They should say it is legal to gamble on Eve-related events.
Let's just think about what they've done in the last year in terms of comments from people, because I've seen them and I've made them. Like the AT, nobody cares about. The vast majority of the player base don't really care, because they've seen it be thrown in previous years. That was extremely bad when Hydra threw it. They've seen gambling on it, and they've become disenfranchised because they don't get to the higher levels, and if they do, they're going to get played out. They've made the point of supporting Theomarchy, which wasn't properly advertised, but when I went onto it, Fozzie was commentating, and Elise and a couple of other people. They were actually interested in it. They should have got more numbers for that. The Hunger Games came up, and to be honest, I think it's probably the Imperium that will push this through, because they've created their own games, and even T have been pushing it for a long time. They've had huge support from CCP for their gaming series. It may well be that going forward the AT takes second place and it becomes something that happens once a year. Maybe it'll change, but maybe they'll promote player gatherings more now that they've released Thunderdome,
and then I'm just
giving people the tools. So but it's for the players to step up and say, right, we're not going to participate.
Can I just interject before you move away from this topic, because it's very important to understand one thing. This ties back to walking in stations. This ties back to the avatars. None of us here would be watching a competitive sport if everyone was running around with black masks on them. And no one knows who it is that's actually doing anything. No one knows who is actually scoring the goals. This ties back to, it has to be about the individual players. It has to be about who is on field, what is their history, and why is it interesting to watch games where they are in the team.
I think you need to treat the AT and EVE Online tournaments as not really esports, because they're a little bit fake. Anyway, they're not. It's not gameplay on TQ. We don't fight 5v5 in set matches with points on TQ. It's fake. It is a fake esport, and it always will be.
But what if we did actually? What if we had like the 5v5 format, and we could just bring in like new players, and we could say, okay, you're gonna jump into a frigate with me, and we're gonna all take frigates, and we're gonna 5v5, and we don't have to like take a lot of time to roam or whatever. We just do 5v5 with frigates, and we actually have some fun.
You know, this has been a huge argument the whole time that I've been playing, is whether or not TQ should have a tourney system built into the game that the older players have fought tooth and nail not to have put in. But CCP, I think it was Grayscale, just before he left, developed the dojo that completely contradicted that, because it was like, the dojo exists, you can go in and you can set up small gang fights in a limited arena. People have been asking for arenas for years and being shouted down because it was like, well, if you put this in, it'll kill PvP on the server. But the reality is, if you put this in, it might not.
Well, I'd be inclined to say that if they considered that there should be a sink, so a cost for using the dojos or the tournament systems. So the only thing that the only thing that should be different is that it should be isolated from anyone being able to grief them, right?
Yeah.
It should still be something that actually costs assets. Then I would be 100% for it, because then it would be a motivation to actually do something that's still PvP related, but it's more sports-like, and there's a known risk. There's no outer risk variables.
Well, you know, loads of us, like loads of EVE players, went into tanks in beta, and that was what, 2010, and we wanted 15-minute matches, and we actually played them while we were logged into EVE doing EVE stuff, and we all got really hooked on it. And then we did warships, and people have done Hon and all of the other MOBAs, but people like those fixed time matches because you can just nip in and out. It's quick.
I think the important aspect still comes down to what organization is in this, so the teams and the individual star players. Without that focus, it will never kick off. It will never become big, and it will never be anything but niche.
I honestly think that the Entosis system was designed around something like a capture the flag system in a small game. So I think they looked at tanks and were like, how many people play tanks? What do you have to do? It's strategic, you have to move about, and they were trying to take that short-term model and impose it on EVE, and it's failed. But that doesn't mean that the arena system won't work for the niche of people that want to do it.
Oh, yeah. and while we are armchair developing a little bit, I really like what I see when I look at EVE Valkyrie. The problem is that what I want is a racing game. I want the EVE Wipeout. Yes. Because then you have the sports and you have the speed, and there's...
Do you remember the very old idea about interplanetary flying? It was really, that was pre-Incarna, where they showed us a tech video of flying inside a planet. Because I remember looking and thinking, that looks like racing to me, and you could totally make a minigame from that.
And that would be a natural esport, right? Already there. It wouldn't even demand that much.
I just want to add something real quick. It seems really bad that people or players put so much more work and effort and passion into something that's fake, like the AT.
I think it's the fundamental of EVE that the players are actually almost more passionate about the game than any of the developers. I know that you can say that, well, they really like making these things, but they're not obsessed to the same degree as the players.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like I don't know, it's just tough to describe, you know, like, because and every time I talk to CSMs, I kind of run into this kind of idea that the way we interpret and experience the game is totally different from the way devs do it. So there is a genuine disconnect between devs and players that is so much more that is so much bigger compared to other developer-player relationships in other games, I think.
Oh, and Ace points out something important, that there's actually a lot of money at stake in the AT. And I think this ties back to what we were talking about, was it one episode or 2 episodes ago, about the fact that it needs to be not easier, but there needs to be tools to lower the barrier of entry. So organizing teams and winning appropriate prizes and financing these things is it's not always just PL or goons that can just throw infinite money at something, because then it's basically just leveraging, just like in movies, and then they're just cashing out.
It would be nice to automate the process where you could have feeder rounds and have everyone actually play for the chance to be in a tournament rather than having to pay or having to be lucky. But that requires some more effort, which, I mean, a volunteer team is not going to have that much time to do that. But if we can automate the process of matches and stuff like that to a point where feeder matches are easy to do, that would be great, right?
And it ties back to the fact that if you want to build all these things from the player base, you need to make it easier to create things like subscription things or payment for watching a stream or any type of call it EVE-esque monetization, right? Because you can't have a tournament be profitable, just like you can't have an EVE media site be profitable if you do not have a business model that has a revenue stream. And CCP has not been supportive of creating tools for us to make it easier to do things like payments, to do things like accounting, to do things like publicly owned or shares-based businesses, whether that's owning the equivalent of a Manchester United team, or whether it's launching an IPO. It doesn't matter, it's the same thing. The problem is in the fundamentals, and CCP keeps saying, well, it's not worth it. Well, it is, because it's going to be worth it in the long run. It's going to take time for the players to figure out how to implement these tools, make them into an emergent gameplay, but if we don't have them from the beginning, we can't make this. It's just going to be too much hassle.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we'll see, man. I mean, it's a lot of disconnect in the game universe, you know, between the players and the tools. I mean, for fuck's sake, man, like TCP doesn't even give us content anymore. Can't remember the last time they actually gave us content.
Well, they released that rogue drone thing.
Come on, Marsha.
Let's talk about skins now.
It's an event. It's still.
I see what you're saying, but I'm thinking about like as a player, as potentially a leader of other players to do an event, right? I mean, it's why are we? What's the carrot?
But that's,
you know, I mean, why? What's the carrot to call on fleet members to do something when the loss? You can't be passionate about the loss. You can't even be passionate about killing something of value anymore. I mean, Titans die, and people are like Titan, whatever,
yeah,
new Rifter.
That sounds more like bitterness on your part because you're tearing down citadels in high sec and realizing.
Yeah, stop doing that.
It's probably bad gameplay. That's not necessarily CCP's fault for not providing you content. And the other side of it is, it's still a sandbox. It's not a generic theme park MMO where every 6 months there's a release.
But it is true that it's very difficult to capitalize on the things that CCP has been bringing in. It's very difficult to make anything from it.
Still expect every 6 months or year to get a big patch with loads of new content, and it's like, this will completely reshake the way you play.
Never.
And actually I mean, most of the older players just ride out the changes. They've got the highest SP, they don't need to start re-injecting. They'll learn the new mechanics, they'll probably ignore them. That kind of being spoon-fed content every 6 months to stay interested is the marker of people with a short attention span from traditional MMOs. Sorry, but it is.
It is. It is. I mean, but at the same time, does that mean, because it's kind of disadvantageous then, right? To be high SP, high experience, because then now you've literally hit the ceiling at that point.
I think the problem is that CCP tends to forget that EVE as a game is not very instant gratification friendly. That means that the carrot that you're talking about needs to be of a different type, and you can't just expect people to just show up for funs and giggles. Of course, that does happen a little bit, but on a scale of comparing it to any other game, there's not a lot of instant gratification fun in EVE.
And I was myself watching... Go on, sorry.
Using myself as an example, I mean, I've really transitioned into being an in-game EVE player to a Discord EVE player, an organizer of people. a player outside of the box, and that's kind of what I've turned out to be. I've ran through my capsular evolution, and this is where I'm at right now.
Yeah,
and I feel like
social
a lot of
capital,
people kind
right?
of fall into that same path as well.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
it's social capital instead of some sort of in-game asset benefit, right? Of course, you can, to some extent, convert one into the other, but from a gameplay perspective, playing the meta or whatever you want to call this, it's very different, but it's very, very difficult to keep that up without ending up in some burnout, because CCP is not very good at incentivizing this type of gameplay.
I don't think it is CCP. I think it's. I watched a Netflix program the other day called Ascension, and it cut off after 6 episodes. Apparently, it was shit canned. But they were talking about these people living in a can who've realised that they're in a generation ship, reach a point, and it's a crisis point where they realise that they're never getting off the ship. They're going to be there forever, and they're not going to make landfall in their own lifetime. So they reach a crisis point and they flip out, and then they get over it. And I was thinking, this actually happens in EVE. People reach a crisis point, they play for a bit, and they play to a certain level, and then they realise that that's it. You've learnt the mechanics. Now you have to go play, and it's your world. You have to go shape it, and they don't get beyond that because they kind of sit there going, but CCP are at fault because I'm bored now. And
Well,
the reality is they probably are a little bit, and they could do with fixing things that are broken. But in terms of creating content, it's on you.
Yeah, but that's the problem, right? That's the main problem. I think Oculus was pointing out this thing that things that in the past could not be rushed can be rushed now. And of course that's contradicting myself, because this is a form of instant gratification, but it's an instant gratification in the form of goals, right? What matters? What is your incentive to play on a personal level? And the problem is that when EVE is not a game on rails, so you're not getting a story, the story is other players. It's at a very different pace, and it needs the player to then engage into that meta, otherwise they're not getting that story. The players that just log in, there's a lot of them that just log in, mine a little bit, or PvE, or stuff that are not related to groups, right? People that solo. These people do not get that story. So if they can then take advantage of these things like SP farming and instant and infinite scaling on a competitive level as a solo player, there's no game. There's no game anymore.
I think, like, for an individual player, they're going to reach that critical wall where they realise that that's it. There is nothing left to spoon feed you. Go and do things, and they don't want to do it. And it's far easier to sit there and blame CCP and say, well, actually, we need more updates, things are broken. But they also become infected by other players, which is why I would say don't follow Reddit too closely, because you'll become infected by a negative vibe.
Oh, I totally agree with that. The problem is that in the past we could blame CCP for not telling the player story. This has changed. They are doing that more and more. They have become very much aware that the game content in EVE is pretty much the player base, right? The thing that they need to do is to then make it easier for the players to inform other players that that is where the real game is.
I don't agree. I think the players themselves need to sort of hit that wall, wake up and realise this is all there is. Just in real life, it's not an infinite universe. It has restrictions. It's not perfect. There are things that are broken. You can participate in fixing them. But if you get caught in a cycle of talking about what the problem is and not making any suggestions for improvement, you've just fallen into the trap of you're about to quit.
Okay, to see if we can't round this off and call it a show, I think we are at a point where we can kind of agree that we are in some sort of crisis, whether it's because of Reddit rage, or because of game design, or developers not focusing on the right things, or it's the players that are not good enough at actually figuring out what to motivate them. I think we are definitely seeing an EVE that needs to change, or it will be flat and stale for, well, until someone shuts it down.
Yep. So we'll go around the horn here for shout outs, if anyone has any. Gail, got anything?
My shout out is to the people that are slowly creeping into the new MD forum. I hope that you guys will up the activity level, and I'm hoping that someone is going to take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of activity in the MD market and come out with some interesting business plans.
Nice. Anything, Anathema?
Well, I mean, I've been looking at the new forums more now that I have my thread here and have just some activity, so maybe there's going to be more activity on my part as well. I'm hoping to do more efforts to get some more content from newbies in the markets. Hopefully a second video in the second half of this year, since the first one was quite popular, and yeah, keep the ball running.
Marsha, got anything?
Just shout out to the guests, the people that are in chat. Fair play for coming, and I am reading what you're remarking on and thinking about what you're saying.
Yeah, my shout goes to my alliance. Sorry, dudes, couldn't help. Had 3 like Citadel kill offs like 2 hours ago. I couldn't be there. Also, cool. Next time we run the show, please be in comms. Just saying.
Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one last bit for me. So I've been doing my EVE station trading stream. I'm actually gonna graduate from that a little bit and actually start doing real life stock stuff. I plan to do like real life stock research here a little bit and stream myself doing it. See who shows up.
Oh my god, you've been hit by the same thing that Lockbox got hit by.
Yeah, you know,
Oh, really?
I already have a watch list and everything. It's great.
If you, Caleb, you might have the link to this. VV's old website had the details of his real life stock exchange adventures. Might be useful.
It's a very interesting story, and I hope that we might actually be able to dedicate a show for that exactly, topic-wise. So maybe we can get Rodin and Lockfox, and if someone can find VV and get him to come and talk about how to transition from EVE into real-life markets and how successful it is.
That'd be something.
So on that note, thanks to everyone that showed up, and I hope we can see you back Saturday.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me. Goodbye.